Trump was met last night at the Libertarian Party convention with a raucous crowd and a few rubber chickens from a pro-RFK Jr. super PAC hoping to fire up an already raging audience. The moment Trump took the stage, heckling broke out from libertarians, trying to drown out the rows of his supporters in the back of the room. Now, with a CNN reporter actually witnessed at least one libertarian throwing a punch at a Trump fan. So why did Trump brave the unfriendly audience for this speech? Well, because independent and third-party voters could actually make or break this race. But when you toss in the rest of the candidates who could appear on the ballot, it becomes clear that the two of them actually have a bit of a problem. As you can see, they're very, very close. All right, my panel is back, and John Bresnahan from Punchbowl News is joining us for this conversation as well. Trump's comments were interesting to this crowd last night because he also was clearly trying to talk to them, speak their language, and made some promises to folks in the Libertarian Party.
The Libertarian Party should nominate Trump for President of the United States. Whoa. Only do that if you want to win. If you want to lose, don't do that. Keep getting your 3% every 4 years. I will put a Libertarian in my cabinet. And if you vote for me on day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht to a sentence of time served.
And the one person quoted by Politico, who is the director-at-large Libertarian National Committee, said any libertarian worth their stripes who has looked at Donald Trump's record will see that he barely aligns with the conservative camp and is a far cry from the Libertarian Party. I mean, I guess that's true. I mean, look, Trump's record in office wasn't particularly libertarian.
No. I mean, he grew government, which is the first thing. He ran huge deficits. I mean, he's not a libertarian.
And he signed a surveillance law.
COVID was huge. COVID spending, the whole Operation Warp Speed and everything. They were against COVID vaccines or the whole COVID restrictions. So he's not a libertarian. I do like the idea of seeing a libertarian candidate for cabinet. I would love to see how the Republican Party, the Senate Republicans.
Could Rand Paul get confirmed by the United States Senate?
And how Mitch McConnell and John Thune and John Barrasso and John Cornyn, how they all vote on libertarian candidates. That would be something to see.
Yeah, we'll see if that actually comes to that. But that was, one thing, Dave, you were in the room. He mentioned this pardon of Russ Ulbricht, who was the founder of Silk Road, which is a massive dark web drug market. He was actually charged with money laundering and drug trafficking, and he was given a life sentence. How was that received when he said that?
That was raucous. There were signs distributed throughout the ballroom hours in advance of the speech saying "Free Ross." And he saw a sea of those. He also came to the convention a day after Vivek Ramaswamy warmed him up. He spoke to the convention on Friday, and Vivek, who'd run on pardoning Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, said, and also "Free Ross." And so the message got back to the Trump people. This is a promise that if you go walk into a diner in Minnesota, are people talking about that pardon? Probably not. Are there people who are very intensely focused on that issue and if you make that promise, they'll remember it? There are. And so that was a deliverable. Trump does this in a way that Joe Biden and other candidates do not. He hears something, it's responsive. He does the return on investment calculation, and he said it. The word got out before the speech, but it really surprised people. That was the one moment where he had the crowd in the palm of his hand.
Cynics would call it pandering, but that's another word for it. Meantime, his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, RFK Jr.'s running mate, not Donald Trump's running mate, RFK Jr.'s running mate. RFK Jr. was also in the crowd trying to court voters. Nicole Shanahan is actually going to be speaking later today. There have been not so positive stories about her character in the past week from the Post and the New York Times. She has also been absent from the campaign trail. You've been following RFK Jr.'s campaign. What do you make of this?
The whole campaign is very weird. It's a very disorganized campaign, a lot of eccentric figures, on the staff, and she clearly was brought in, at least in part, because she has a lot of money and can help him get on the ballot, which is expensive in a lot of states. Look, I think people are gravitating to RFK's campaign because they're looking for something different and weird and not the same as the two major party candidates. And so if there are people out there who think that, this ticket is actually going to occupy the White House, maybe this gives them pause. But I think more people are looking at this as a sort of protest vote. And so they're not necessarily looking at this as like, well, I'm not sure that this is someone who could step into the office after, President RFK Jr. or something happens to him. There's a lot of steps to get to that point. But she does seem like a bit of a flake, frankly. She's got an interesting record. She's never been in politics before.
She's very rich. About
very, very, very
$1 billion or so from that, from her divorce settlement. There's also the question about RFK Jr. Why he's so important is because he's actually getting a significant amount of votes in a lot of these, in terms of the polls, about 14% or so. And that could make a huge difference in these swing states. Will he get on the ballot in those swing states? This is the map of where he is on currently in these swing states. Michigan, of course, that is going to be this key battleground state. But there are other ones as well, which they'll be contesting, where they're still trying to get on the ballot, which seems possible. North Carolina, Nevada being some of them, and New Hampshire as well. I mean, this is the real concern from both sides. It's unclear who he takes more support from, but this is why everyone's watching him so closely.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone should be nervous if you're worried about states that could hinge on a few thousand voters. And I think when it comes to a third-party candidate, what's more important even than the candidate or the candidate's message, or in this case, candidate's last name, is having a big pile of money. And that is what RFK got when he chose Nicole Shanahan, was a big pile of money. It costs a lot of money to get on ballots in most of these states. You have to collect thousands and thousands of signatures. That's why you're seeing that they submitted in a number of states, but those signatures have to be vetted, verified. They have to be allowed on the ballot. And I think, to be honest, they've done a pretty impressive job so far. And both candidates, both major party candidates, should be worried if they're able to get on several of these other states.
All right. And, also look at this. There's a question about the brainworm, right? The worm that was in RFK Jr.'s brain. Look at this. 30% of voters are concerned about the parasite potentially impacting his ability to serve. 65% are not concerned.
I mean,
brainworm is good politics.
I believe what actually polled is like,
brainworm.
How on earth? Yeah, I mean, the
And he's actually not
brainworm-
shying away from it either.
He joked
Well, I
about it.
think what this poll shows you is that the brainworm is the least of his worries.
Yeah,
If you're polling at 10%, but 65% of voters don't care that you have a brainworm, clearly they are concerned about other parts of your record, other aspects of your candidacy, other than the brainworm.
No question about that.